Hey, this is Dr. Ben Weitz, host of the Rational Wellness Podcast. I talk to the leading health and nutrition experts and researchers in the field to bring you the latest in cutting-edge health information. Subscribe to the Rational Wellness Podcast for weekly updates. And to learn more, check out my website, drweitz.com. Thanks for joining me, and let's jump into the podcast. Hello, Rational Wellness Podcasters. Today, we will be speaking with Dr. James LaValle about metaflammation and inflammaging. James LaValle is an internationally recognized clinical pharmacist, board-certified clinical nutritionist for close to 40 years now, right?
Yeah.
And he's the author of more than 20 books, including Cracking the Metabolic Code. He's lectured for more than a decade for the American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine. Jim has helped thousands of patients using his metabolic model for health. And he currently is at the LaValle Metabolics in Orange County, California. James is best known for his expertise in personalized integrative therapies, uncovering the underlying metabolic issues that keep people from feeling healthy and vital. He's worked with many professional athletes, been a consultant to many professional teams. And like me, way back in the day, both Jim and I were competitive bodybuilders.
There you go.
For me, it was way back in the 80s.
I think I was in the 70s, my friend.
Oh, okay. I think we're probably around the same age, though.
Yeah.
I'm 66 right now, so.
Yeah, we're right there together then, man.
Oh, okay.
All right.
So how did you first get involved with functional integrative medicine?
Yeah, it was interesting. My cousins were actually importing products from Germany, Reckwig homeopathic formulas, and then representing Soroil nutritional brands. And they were actually calling on a lot of doctors of chiropractic in the 70s. And I was training. I was, high school athlete and, got injured, couldn't play football in college. So I, started doing bodybuilding. And I just started listening to them. But really what got me in it was I'd finished my second competition, national qualifier, won the thing, took all the trophies home, right?
Right.
But I felt like I was 80 years old. I felt horrible. And so I asked them, hey, you got a recommendation on somebody that I could go to? So I went to this doc. He was up in Medway, Ohio, middle of nowhere, but he had a massive practice. He was doctor of chiropractic. He was a chiropractic physician specializing in nutritional therapies. I did what he said. He did electrodermal screening on me, measured my acupuncture meridians, did some adjustment stuff with me, which was super important because of all the 900-pound squats I was doing. My spine was a little compressed and just a little bit. And, but I did what he said and it changed my life. I mean, I felt so much better. And I was just finishing pharmacy school then. I literally got out of pharmacy school and I was like, I got to get involved in this. I don't know how I'm going to do it. But I ended up, literally, I met another rich history with doctors of chiropractic for some reason, met a doc, and I went to a weekend seminar, met my second mentor, because the guy I went to ended up being my first mentor, teaching me a lot about nutritional medicine and labs and biochemistry. My second mentor was Dr. Alexander Wood, God rest his soul, passed away a few years back. Started the Ontario College of Naturopathic Medicine, went through the chiropractic school, got his degree in psychology, actually taught at Baden-Baden at Medicine Week in Germany. So he was one of these guys. He was into the chemistry, right?
Right.
And it just took me by storm, man. And it's been 40 years. 26 books, 5 databases, 200 articles. I mean, research, teaching at College of Pharmacy and Medicine, University of Cincinnati, New York State College of Chiropractic and Oriental Medicine, George Washington School of Medicine. All of it was just this journey. And I actually, started seeing a lot of people. So I had a clinic in Ohio. We were seeing 300 to 400 people a week.
Wow, that's a lot.
And all on personalized care. So I got to see a lot of people, and I got to see how people were falling in these clusters of dysfunction. And that's when in 1997, I did my first lecture on the Metabolic Code. And now in 2024, we've got, a full database, informatics that takes people's labs, their symptoms, their biometrics, and all their data, and shows where they're clustering. And so it's been a minute. It's kind of crazy how 40 years goes by when you're passionate every day. I mean, every day I wake up. I'm talking, my son's in the business with me now. I must have pulled 7 studies last night and was shooting them to him like, hey man, you got to look at this. We got to get going on this. Right.
Oh, cool.
So it's just fun, so that's how I got started in it. Personal journey, personal healing, and then seeing how powerful it was for people, through my last 40 years of being a service to folks. And now working with Lifetime, 200 clubs, 2 million members, and as their chief science officer, actually designing programs where we can really affect a large population of people. So pretty keyed up about it.
What is Lifetime?
Lifetime is Lifetime Fit. Used to be Lifetime Fitness. So they've got the 200 fitness. I call them country clubs of wellness, right? Because they have so many services in them.
Okay.
But, we're doing longevity centers in them where we're, doing labs, and we're, really working at driving back this concept of metabolic inflammation or metaflammation. And the byproduct of suspending metabolic inflammation is that you don't age as rapidly, right? I mean, for all the work in anti-aging medicine, I don't have any 40-year-olds come back to me looking 10 years old. We're just trying to suspend our suspend that process, right? How can we be as productive as we can, enjoying our life as long as we can?
Right. Yeah. How to slow the rate of biological aging.
That's right. That's exactly it.
Yeah. Do you use those methylation time clocks as a measure of it? Have you run like the True Age test?
I know True Age really well. Like, I love their multi-organ tests that they just came out with. And I think those are great tests that kind of give you a mark of where you're at. But what you really need is to dive into where's your metabolomics? What is your blood showing what is going on, or urine or saliva, right? There's all kinds of ways to get data off people.
Yeah.
But looking at your metrics and saying, where am I? And what do I need to do? What countermeasures do I need to do in order to create health? And, and I think the process, I don't think it's hard to do. I think the further along you're down a disease path, the harder it is to turn that ship around. But I'm really trying to get people to identify where they're at earlier in their life. Where are you at in that process, so we can get you in the right spot quicker.
Yeah.
And I always tell people, look, there aren't any magical Tibetan goji berries picked in the moonlight that are going to fix everything for you. It's going to be work. It's going to be work, but it's worth it when you're just waking up thinking about what you have to do that day instead of how bad you feel.
Right. Yeah, I'm constantly keeping track of what the latest biomarkers are that we need to be paying attention to. Uric acid, which is the best cholesterol marker? Is it LDL-C? No, it's LDL particle number. No, it's small dense LDL. No, it's ApoB. It's,
LPA. It's
LP little a. There's always a new one.
Right. Exactly. Well, I mean, my hot one right now, and it's been for a long time, but it's finally become unpopular, is measuring galectin-3. A lot of people, they just thought, wow, it's, oh yeah, if you're an endurance runner and you got a high galectin-3, you're going to get fibrosis and get some heart failure. But, it turns out that it's pretty tied to neuroinflammation and dementia risk and stroke risk and diabetes risk. And, it's one of those markers that you can get pretty easy, but
yeah, we don't measure it regularly, mostly because we're using Vibrant and they're not offering it right now. And it's kind of an expensive marker too, isn't it?
It's not too bad, really. Okay. It's not too bad, but
I talked to Isaac Elias a lot. He's Mr. Galectin-3 modified citrus pectin.
Of course, yeah. Drink that modified citrus pectin. But it's I think it's interesting because I think what we end up doing is a lot of times we look for these really avant-garde labs, which I dig it all, right? I mean, I've got my second edition of Your Blood Never Lies book I'm editing right now. So I dig that, but I think a lot of times people miss foundational issues. And foundational issues is what creates the ripples in those avant-garde labs. If you didn't have insulin resistance and you didn't have metabolic inflammation, inflammatory cytokines being dug up and pushed out through your gut and then affecting your enteric nervous system, triggering your brain, well, you know what? You wouldn't have to worry about measuring a galectin-3, right? Because you'd have fixed your glucose, fixed your insulin, had better lipids, had better red blood cell mag, less C-reactive protein, right? These foundational markers that I think, sometimes we just look past them and we really need to pay attention.
So are fasting glucose, insulin, hemoglobin A1C enough for insulin resistance, or do we need another marker? I know there's some new tests available.
Yeah, there's obviously there's the glyc-A, there's the HOMA-IR, but honestly, if you have an A1C, a fasting insulin, and a fasting glucose, and if for some reason that person's sitting in front of you fooling you on a fasting insulin, they're overweight, they got a lot of visceral fat, you can see that. Well, sure, man, give them a 75-gram carb load and then have them do their glucose and insulin and watch that insulin come to life, right? So, but I mean, certainly you could look at HOMA-IR, look at glyc-A, and I think you would see, if you can't pick it up there, you're probably, you're looking in the wrong area then. But I mean, let's face it, you got half the U.S. population for sure. Yeah, 1 out of 2 people walking around are either insulin resistant or diabetic already, and people that are overweight but they don't meet the criteria for insulin resistance, they probably got some level of insulin resistance going on. So we're probably talking about
we all know we've seen patients who have like a fasting glucose of 95, and because it's not over 100, they don't qualify as pre-diabetic. So, their doctor tells them not to worry about it.
And they're already in trouble.
Right.
I mean, you're already in 95 blood sugar, you're 60% risk of being a diabetic, and you're already damaging your arteries. So, 100%.
What about the cholesterol metrics? I've been diving into some of the research recently, and some of the papers are kind of mixed as to how important LDL is and whether a super low LDL is super beneficial or not. I know some people, I've traditionally tried to get the LDL below 70, but I just recently read a paper from a couple of years ago showing that LDL below 70, there was increased mortality, and that the target was like between 100 and what was it? 120 and 180 was the sweet spot.
Yeah, I mean, you know what? I think for one, we're so focused on LDL. And I think there's a couple things. One, if your LDL is too low, you're going to have a hard time making your sex hormones, especially testosterone. If your LDL gets too low, am I going to be able to repair my cell membranes, especially in the brain? So I think there's a little bit of concern when you drive it too low. I think the type of LDL cholesterol you have, are they big and fluffy? Are they
Right. Small and
small
dense.
and penetrating the glycocalyx, so the inner lining of the artery?
Right.
And even when it's small particle LDL, it depends on, well, what's your redox poise, right? Or are you under a high oxidative rate? So do you have a lot of
Right.
oxidized LDL? Do you have a
Right.
high myeloperoxidase? I
Right.
think all of those are important. And then, of course, we certainly see populations that have elevated LDL, but very low rates of heart
Mm.
disease, you know?
Right.
So there are subpopulations in different countries where we see that, and it doesn't matter as much. But, we're not in other countries. So that's the one thing I always laugh about when people say that. It's like, oh, well, guess what? And, and when you live in Sardinia, you live to 100 and look at the carbs that they eat. Well, yeah, well, if I was in Sardinia and eating clean food and walking, up 400 steps a day at the age of 80,
Exactly.
I'd be in good shape. But I'm in America. And when I'm in America,
We're driving in the car, going in the elevator, getting as little exercise as you can.
oh my God, it's just a different world, and the quality of the food, and there's so many different things. So I think that cholesterol, there are issues around apolipoprotein B, lipoprotein little a, LPPLA2. So these fractions of lipoproteins that show that there's metabolic inflammation. So one of the earliest signs of metaflammation is that you start making more bad actor lipids, smaller particle LDL, more lipoprotein little a, more apolipoprotein B, more oxidized LDL. And then your blood gets stickier, right? Your fibrinogen gets higher. All of those are kind of like the canaries in the coal mine, right? It's not, I think lipids are important. And I think but it's one aspect of important. If you didn't have, how many times have you seen people that they're 80 pounds overweight and their lipid profile looks perfect because genetically they're just not predisposed? And you look at somebody like myself, all the genes for diabetes, all the genes for heart disease, all the genes for obesity. I got to watch everything I'm dang doing, or all of a sudden my lipid profile looks like a bomb hit it, right?
Yeah.
And so I think there's that individuality where the person that might have the good lipids may have issues in other areas, because 40% of heart attacks come in people with normal lipids and no plaque.
Right.
So it's not just a lipid problem, but it is our heart disease is our number one killer. I don't think we put enough attention on the neurovascular network, or our nervous system, or what's going on with the central nervous system.
Now wait a minute.
Tone.
Let me just ask you. You said 40% of the population has a heart attack has normal lipids and no plaque. I thought it was normal lipids but still have plaque.
No, they've got that. It's a variance, right? You've got some that have normal lipids and may have plaque burden, and you've got some that don't have plaque burden and still have a heart attack.
Okay.
And the problem with that is even though your lipids are normal, of course, you get plaque burden when you're insulin resistant, right? I mean, without a doubt, insulin resistance is our big cause. And that's why when you look at the data on GLP-1s, so the people are thinking about Ozempic and Mounjaro, the information there shows that when they give a GLP-1 and it reduces that nonstop glucagon activity, that cardiac remodeling takes place. The left ventricle gets smaller. There's less coronary artery burden. Blood pressures go down. There's a lot of positives because you've regulated another aspect of pancreatic function.
Isn't it interesting that at the same time that we have these peptides, because these drugs like Ozempic are peptides, are the most prescribed drugs in the country, and the FDA is restricting the use of peptides?
Yeah, it's interesting. I went to the hearing on October 29th to do public comment on peptides, and then we're going to be doing nominations for peptides on December 4th. I think there's a happy middle ground in it. I don't think that there's been enough clarity on what can be done for compounding, like give enough evidence that should be nominated to category 1 for compounding. And that's what I learned when I was there is, the FDA saying, look, show us some data on some patients, gender, age, labs, dosage given, and what's the outcome. And then you've got rationale for putting things on category 1, which is, of course, where you can, nominate it and then they can be made. So I do think it's an interesting time. I mean, look, peptides aren't new, right? Insulin, 1923. So
Right.
peptides have been around 100 years. And I always make that, I try to get people to understand, because there's all this negative and positive brouhaha about GLP-1s. Oh my God, you're only going to lose lean muscle. Oh my God, you're going to be on them forever. Well, if you don't change the way you eat and the way you exercise and the way you sleep, you're right. You're probably going to be on them forever. You're going to have to change. It's a work, but it's worth it thing, right? You got to change. But, a lot of people, nobody argued. And I had to do this when I was when I first came on to Lifetime, because we're utilizing GLP-1s there. And people were upset right initially. Some of members, oh my God, we're here because of a healthy way of life. Well, you wouldn't deny people insulin, right? I mean, you wouldn't say to people, hey, never give insulin. Right. GLP-1s provide, as peptides, just like other peptides, whether you're looking at sermorelin to help with reinitiating growth hormone in people that have shut their growth hormone down due to excess stress. GLP-1s are helping us with the chronic problems of poor glucose utilization. So you don't die overnight like a person that doesn't have insulin, and their glucoses are in the 800s, and they're damaging their eyes and their arteries, right, and amputations, all the terrible things that happen if they survive. They don't go into a coma. Right. But what is happening is when you're using the GLP-1s chronically, you're reducing that future risk of heart disease, dementia, helping with food noise and addiction of food. And it's a different path. And I think peptides are, an invaluable part, but just another tool in our toolkit. Let's don't lean on them so heavy that we don't think you need to change the way you're eating, get Correct. Core nutrients that your body needs, understand how to cope with stress. All of that stuff still needs to happen.
Make sure you're including resistance training. Make sure you're eating healthier.
100%. And
I'm a little skeptical, though, because not a week goes by that there's not some other positive benefit of GLP-1s. I mean, it's just, it's almost ridiculous. I'm like, are you kidding me? It's like everything, it helps.
Yeah, well, I think so here's how I look at that. If you look at insulin resistance and everything it causes, right?
And obesity and everything it causes, right? Obesity, so you reduce obesity, you reduce insulin resistance. Okay. I get it.
Because of that. Yeah. But I will say, I think that just relying on the drug and not trying to change your lifestyle, I think there's going to be a rate limiting benefit for people.
Sure. Yeah, I've seen a number of patients who took the drug, lost 30, 40, 50 pounds, stopped taking it, gained it right back.
Exactly. And so I think, once again, whether I look at a botanical, a nutrient, a lifestyle modification, homeopathic medicine, whatever it is, you got to have a fully formed thought about, where am I going with my health? First of all, what am I willing to do? Like, how much am I willing to change the way I eat, the way I move, how I address my stress? What environmental burdens have I been exposed to? Am I willing to dig deep into really cleaning my chemistry up so that I can turn back that inflammaging process that is going on? And I wish I made that term up. That term is in the medical literature since 2008. I mean, that's almost 20 years we've been talking about metabolic inflammation. Because the biggest thing is, you have a lot of people that got frustrated. They ate right and they exercised and they didn't lose a pound.
Right.
And so, in a lot of ways, this category of medications are somewhat of a miracle. I call them a lifeline to getting your health back. It's interesting that when people take GLP-1s, they're 2 times as likely to go back to the gym than if they don't take them.
Is that right?
Yeah. That was a statistic that just came out, which makes sense. Hey, I'm starting to lose weight. Wow, my self-esteem is coming back. Hey, maybe I should go back to trying to take care of myself. Right. So I think it's good. I just think that even when I started out with peptides, you get enamored by the power of them, right? Because, you take BPC, great for connective tissue, healing up the gut, or you look at the growth hormone secretagogues. Hey, it helps me to sleep better because I'm restoring my circadian rhythm to my sleep wake cycle and cortisol and growth hormone, right? You're going to feel better, but you still got to look at those labs and go, where are you going? Is your blood sugar still at 93 in the morning, or 95 or 97? Is your insulin still 10? Where are your lipids? What's your mean platelet volume like? Because that's a marker of inflammation. Is your homocysteine elevated? Yeah, you got to dig in, and really drive yourself. It just depends how passionate you are about getting well. And unfortunately, I think in our culture, a lot of times people don't, it's changing now, but I would say, I'm putting on my hat like we've been in this business for a minute, right?
Yeah.
And a lot, the previous 30 years, nobody really changed until they felt bad enough for the most part.
Right.
They felt bad enough. They got scared enough and they said, I got to change.
Yeah.
What's exciting about the last 5 years is people are having that forward thought of, gee, I want to measure my biological age. I want to learn about how to take care of myself. And so I think that's fantastic. I wish it would have happened 20 years ago, so I could have 20 more years of having fun with people being more proactive.
I've really been enjoying this discussion, but I just want to take a few minutes to tell you about a product that I'm very excited about. Imagine a device that can help you manage stress, improve your sleep, and boost your focus, all without any effort on your part. The Apollo wearable is designed to do just that. Created by neuroscientists and physicians, this innovative device uses gentle vibrations to activate your parasympathetic nervous system, helping you feel calmer, more focused, and better rested. Among the compelling reasons to use the Apollo wearable are that users experience a 40% reduction in stress and anxiety. Patients feel that they can sleep. Their sleep improves up to additional 30 minutes of sleep per night. It helps you to boost your focus and concentration. And it's scientifically backed. And the best part is you can get all these benefits with a special $40 discount by using the promo code Weitz, Weitz, my last name, at checkout to enjoy these savings. So go to Apollo Neuro and use the promo code Weitz today. And now back to our discussion. My biggest worry with the GLP-1s is reducing gut motility, because I treat a lot of patients for gut problems, IBS, SIBO, reflux, etc.
Sure.
And reduced gut motility is a big factor in all those patients. And we know that these drugs reduce gut motility.
Yeah, I mean, I would say I worry about that when people are going in and they're getting them prescribed by their physician, their primary care, and they're taking the full dose right away.
Right.
They're going big right away.
Right.
It really runs the risk of reducing gut motility. But and what I have found is by titration of dosing, if and a lot of clinicians have said the same thing, right? Is if you can titrate the dose, get to the minimum effective dose where people are losing weight, make sure they're taking fiber, maybe make sure they're doing some artichoke extract. And look, everybody's gut needs worked on regardless, right? I mean, how many people have a great gut microbiome these days?
Right.
It's like, oh yeah, right. That's a unicorn. And so, people don't get prebiotics. They probiotics are all over the place in terms of their efficacy.
We're all getting exposed to antibiotics and pesticides and glyphosate and look at all the hand sanitizers and pesticides people used the last few years. So
100%, right? And so I think that as long as you keep their bowels moving regular, and they didn't have pre-existing SIBO, right? I mean, they got a pre-existing condition.
Right.
It's a different story. But as long as their bowels are moving good, they're not bloated, they're not gassy, they're losing weight, it's a good thing. But I also worry about people doing this stuff on their own. They're buying for research only, or not for human or animal use
Peptides.
product.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're
Yeah.
taking GLP-1s on their own. I mean, if you looked on Facebook groups for GLP-1s, you'll have people, they show their syringe and they're asking, is this the right dose? That is scary.
Yeah.
I mean, we want people empowered, but
Right.
we want people to have guidance.
Yeah.
Get someone you can work with that'll help you.
Yeah.
Because there are concerns. I mean, you could have a side effect. It can
Right.
happen.
Right.
And
No, I come across that all the time. I'm also a little nervous about, even though I think it's great that people are empowered, that now people can go and order their own labs, and then they're interpreting themselves based on Dr. Google and,
that's legitimate, though. I mean, once again, there's a reason why people spend time going through college and learning healthcare
Right.
is so that we can provide a full thought for
Right.
people about a plan. And that's probably the biggest thing that I think I try to encourage people is get a plan. If your cortisol's high, your morning serum cortisol's high, or you're stressed throughout the day and you get a 4-point salivary cortisol and you flattened your cortisol curve, you need help to correct it.
Right.
And because there's downstream problems that have occurred because of that. And
Yes.
you want to follow it. I mean, look, unfortunately, I don't even think people know their blood pressure, and they're worried about getting the Tibetan goji berries laced with peptides. I mean, it's make sure you master those basics and then move forward into as advanced as you want to go, right? If you want to live, I always say, everybody's wanting to talk about living to 120. Let's get people to 85 without being sick.
Right.
Can we?
You mentioned one of the interesting inflammation markers. I want to ask you about two of them because I know you're an expert at lab interpretation. You mentioned the mean platelet volume. I also want to ask you about the neutrophil lymphocyte ratio, which is another way to get a gauge on inflammation. So talk about the mean platelet volume. Why does the number of platelets have anything to do with inflammation, and what number should we be looking at to indicate inflammation with mean platelet volume?
Well, so mean platelet volume is going to be, the volume of the platelet, right? And it turns out that they get bigger as there's metabolic inflammation taking place. Typically, what I tell people, because depending on which lab you get, when you get into the 4th quartile of normal, so when you're at the high end of normal, you've probably got some underlying metabolic inflammation. Now, what would you compare against that? You could look at basophils. If your basophil is 1 or more, then you're making more interleukin-6, which is an inflammatory cytokine. If your cortisol is elevated, you're making more IL-6. It just happens automatically. And then when you look at neutrophils and lymphocytes, that starts to get interesting because ratios are ratios are interesting to me because initially you may see a high neutrophil, right? Which a high neutrophil is telling you, okay, immune system's kind of getting jacked up a little bit. But as you stress your immune system over time, those neutrophils start to come way down. And then with lymphocytes, you have this same issue of you don't want them too high and you don't want them too low. So the initial thought process is, well, where are my neutrophils? Are they in the 70s and 80s? Are my lymphocytes in the upper 30s? Are my lymphocytes now in the 20s and my neutrophils down at 50? So the ratio stayed the same, but you're wearing your immune system out because you look at your monocytes, your eosinophils, and your basophil percents, and you're seeing all this activity. And the problem I really think is monocytes trigger macrophages, right? So you've got M1 macrophages and M2 macrophages. You got so one's pro-inflammatory, one's anti-inflammatory. So as you start to look at, oh, gee, you got a monocyte of 13, your C-reactive protein's 1.5 and your basophils are 1 and your neutrophils are 79. You got all this stuff saying, oh, yeah, you're going down a metabolic inflammation path. Nothing's really completely out of whack yet, but you clearly see that path, and MPV, it's usually just glossed over. People just go, oh, MPV, whatever,
right.
Although when it's really high, right, if it's really out of bounds, you got to worry about neoplasms, you got to worry about cancer. But that trending beforehand is where it gets interesting in terms of looking for that inflammation.
And you're saying if it's not necessarily even in the red, but if it's in the highest quartile, then you should start worrying. Like the labs we use, I think over 12 is considered
it depends on which lab you look at. Some of them are 12.5, some of them is 12, one's 15, like depending on your Quest, LabCorp, Vibrant, wherever you're getting it. So you just want to look at that quartile and go, well, if I'm solidly in that fourth quartile, or how I like to tell people is, if you're 100 yards away from the Grand Canyon and you take one step, it's not a big deal. If you're at the edge of the Grand Canyon and you take one step, you're still on good ground. You're still on good ground, but that one step's a way different experience. Yeah. and so, that's why a lot of times I look at both ends. Some labs, if you're really low, like a free T3, you're at 2.3 and 2.2 is the limit. Maybe you got to look at how you're converting your T4 to T3. Yeah. So that's the part that's important. So yeah, MPV big, homocysteine big, galectin-3 big. Obviously the obvious markers, looking at basophils, that's a big one. To me, monocytes are a biggie. And then of course, looking if you're making bad actor lipids. And where's your insulin and where's your glucose? I mean, those are all really key factors. Uric acid, you had mentioned, a biggie for oxidative stress in the body.
Over
and these are easy ones to get, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Without even, going to the more avant-garde, looking at glutathione peroxidase and, looking at deoxyguanosine, 8-OHDG is phenomenal, right? For damage to your DNA. But look, we don't even look at urinary pH. The cheapest marker in the world for me for baseline health is urinary pH.
Yeah, if it's too acidic.
Yeah, too acidic, you've got excess hydrogen ions, bottom line. And in human studies, it's been correlated to renovascular damage, so damaging the blood flow to your kidneys, and the progression of renal disease, even after you correct for lipids, blood pressure, and blood sugar. So if your pH is still acidic, you're still damaging your kidneys. And oh, by the way, we give people sodium bicarb when they're nearing the need for dialysis to extend the time before they need dialysis. Right? But so why are we waiting until you need dialysis to alkalinize your urine? Let's try giving you some mag and potassium and eating some greens. Keep your urine alkaline. Protect your kidneys. Right? And these are things in medicine. It's not. I'm like that.
But that's the first thing they'll tell you if your kidneys are if your kidney markers are starting to look bad. They'll tell you not to have any potassium.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. It's like get your pH up. You'll be okay. Now you don't want it too high, right? Because then you're not digesting your proteins, and so you don't want a pH of 8, but you certainly don't want a pH of 5 or 5.5, which is common.
Right. So what are some of the other root causes of obesity? How much of obesity is genetic, and why do some people have a slower metabolic rate?
Well, I mean, on obesity, I would say it's not that genetic. I'd say there's a small fraction of people where it's genetic. I would say there might be genetic markers that lead you to root causes that could get you to become obese. Like you have a really strong, maybe you've got multiple genetic markers for, say, diabetes and blood sugar dysregulation, and maybe that precludes you there.
Okay.
But even then, I think the genetic side is low. I think when I look at obesity, there's environmental burden. We know that things like pesticides are a big problem for how your insulin receptor works. Stress, cortisol is a big one for telling your body how to store fat. That, and then nutrient deficiencies are big. So you've got environmental burden, and that would even include like mold people that are, kind of what we call the moldies or the chronic inflammatory response syndrome folks, because they go into aerobic glycolysis as well. And so therefore they become metabolically inefficient. Then now they're making 2 packets of energy instead of, 30 plus. And now, so they're good at storing fat as well.
And we have these chemicals that are known as obesogens that are directly 100%. Contributing.
Drugs. I mean, there's a lot of drugs. The chemicals, including prescription drugs, cause weight gain. So women on oral contraceptives, the drug that's used a lot of time, in mental health issues, Seroquel.
Right.
People will gain 30, 40 pounds on Seroquel. Right.
Yeah.
And they didn't eat 800 pounds of food.
Right.
To get the extra 30 pounds on, right?
Yeah.
But their metabolism got altered. And then, I think things like, look, they're basic.
Move your camera up a little bit. We're losing the top of your head.
There we go. Yeah. So, one of the other issues, of course, is, magnesium, for example.
Right.
Low magnesium status. You're talking about probably the number one cause of a functional deficiency that causes prediabetes, prehypertension, and obesity, or basically the prevalence to metabolic syndrome. And that's NIH data. And why is it a surprise? We don't put magnesium sprinkles on our nachos. It isn't in our chicken wing sauce. We don't breathe it in from our catalytic converters in our environmental air that we breathe in. And if you're not eating greens on a regular basis, and the greens aren't rich in trace minerals from the soil that they were grown in, where are you going to get your magnesium?
Yeah.
And, it's an estimated 73% of the U.S. population is below the optimal level of magnesium. And that's what the government studies say. I think it's more like 90% of the population.
Sure, absolutely. We see the same thing. Isn't it insane that in our society, we got all these companies making and marketing ultra processed foods that are creating a big part of this obesity. And then we have to spend thousands of dollars per month putting people on GLP-1s to overcome the side effects of eating all this crap. It's insane what we're doing.
That's the dog chasing its tail. It's terrible. And we've all heard about it now. It's finally being popularized, but those of us that have been in this industry for years, like you and me, we know that, the food that's in Europe is better than the food that's here because they have mandated regulations. There's no GMOs. You can't add a bunch of stuff to the food.
Right.
The ingredient list is way shorter. And we honestly don't know the impact when we start to put all these chemicals together in our body. We have not studied it. And even like the EPA was supposed to be doing studies on, all the different pesticides and different chemicals in the environment and its impact on us. Those studies were mandated. They haven't been done. And so,
they're not going to be done in the next 4 years. If we even have an EPA in 4 years.
Yeah, maybe when I've got a bronze statue of me, I hope, with an herb in my hand. But of course, probably there'll be a pigeon or two on top of it, putting some stains on my copper. I don't know. It's not getting done in the near future. And that's why it's so important for people to understand. Nobody is going to give you the right to good health. Nobody, I don't have a card to give someone and say, here's your good health card. Right. You have to attack it. Because the one thing I always tell people, and I have a lot of, like you've got a lot of people that come in here pretty sick, and and I'll say, and I've got my full team, nurse practitioners, medical docs, and then we got a team, dietitians, you name it, right? In the end, if you get sick and God forbid you passed away, right? People are going to be at that copier, at the water cooler, or at the luncheon table, just saying how much they miss you for about 1 week. And then somebody's going to be sitting in your spot. And it sounds cruel, but it's like, don't sacrifice your health at any stage, because you know what? You're here for your loved ones and your family members and your community. And you have to, if you think there's a magic bullet out there, there isn't. There isn't one in the natural world. There isn't one in the peptide world. There isn't one in the drug world. Now, can we have heroic things happen? Absolutely. You can save a person's life who's in an acute situation from modern drug therapy, surgery, and drug. That's all good. But really, you got to work at your health. That's the bottom line, man. I mean, I'm glad we're getting to talk about this, because I rarely get to espouse this message, because everybody just wants to say, hey, what's the next peptide? Is it OS01, which is a small molecule that improves mTOR signaling and AMP kinase and induces autophagy at the same time? Love OS01.
Okay, that's a new one. Never heard of it. Okay,
well, you're gonna have to look that one up, man, because that's the next hot thing.
OS1.
But it's great, but it still doesn't take the substitute of, hey, what is my stress good? Am I holding in a bunch of penned up negative emotions? You got to get through, you got to slug through some of that residual tar and residue so that you can really, grab that health you deserve.
When it comes to peptides, what just came across my vision recently, the last couple of weeks, is there's now vegetable-based peptides. There's the
polypeptides. Yeah.
Yeah, there's the one from what's it called? Peptistrong supposedly helps you build muscle.
I got to be honest. I have not found the peptides to be that effective.
Okay,
I've known about them for a while. I mean, I've been lecturing on them for about 3-4 years now. And I think there's a space for them. I think they're doing things that are positive. But what people are trying to do in the marketing world is, hey, here's these plant peptides that are kind of like the peptides that you already know about, but can't get.
Okay.
They don't have that same level of impact in your chemistry that these other peptides have.
Okay.
But there's peptides all throughout nature. They're just small chains of amino acids.
Right.
That's all they are.
But the whole key is, do they signal to our cells to do, the right things?
Yeah, exactly. And look, I think one of the issues that came up, at least when I was at the FDA, and I thought, you know what, this is a good thought, is, you got to look at immunogenicity. If you're injecting a peptide and you're putting into the tissues, what is happening? How is the immune system identifying that? And are there any adulterants in the peptide if it's not made in a compounding pharmacy for human use? You're just out there searching on your own and grabbing stuff.
Right.
You can be reacting to an adulterant. It could be not the peptide. It could have not been fully synthesized. Right. And I think that's another thing that I think people need to realize. It's not like going out and buying vitamin A or ashwagandha.
Right.
It's different than that.
Yeah. Yeah. The plant-based peptides I've seen recently are oral, and some of them are being sold by some of the professional companies.
I think they're good. I think they're good. And I think there's a market opportunity because peptides is on the front of everyone's mind. Look, there's a group out of Taiwan that is taking and making proteins that have peptides embedded in them. And it's just a protein powder, but it's got peptides that are embedded in them. I think that's interesting. I think that there's going to be more interesting delivery methods to take natural peptides and get them into the body.
Right.
Because now, the science is there, the awareness is there from the consuming public, and that's what drives innovation.
Yeah, you mentioned BPC 157, but that's one of the ones that's been taken off the market, right?
Well, it can't be compounded as a drug.
Okay.
But there is it is a naturally occurring compound in your gastric juice. So people are selling it as a dietary supplement. And so depending on the type of BPC,
right, you mean oral, you can sell it orally.
Yeah. You can't. There's no injectable, even a B vitamin is considered a dangerous drug and would require a prescription. Anytime you do an injection, by default, it falls in the dangerous drug category. Right. Dangerous drug just means caution. It's not like dangerous to do it. It's just, it creates an extra layer of attention.
Right.
And the need for a prescription from a licensed provider that can write a prescription.
Right.
That's why when people are buying peptides on their own and injecting them, like you said, you're concerned with people being cavalier about what they're doing.
Yeah.
Hey, look, they're called a dangerous drug for a reason. Maybe you just shouldn't buy that and inject it yourself because you think it's a good idea.
Right. Yeah. And that is happening a lot. Are there any strategies or supplements for longevity that you're particularly excited about these days?
Well, I mean, I probably take a little bit different look at it.
Okay.
I think that there's a new extraction coming out that is going to raise oxygen in tissues. It's a salidroside extract. That to me is exciting because when you can improve oxygen perfusion in the tissues, you're going to have healthier tissues. Okay. So I think that is interesting. I think Neurovascular, which is a combination product that was developed by Hans Vink, and Hans was the scientist that first discovered the glycocalyx. So when you see those pictures of the hairy-like projections of the artery, that was Hans Vink's work. And they actually developed a nutrient that helps to improve your microcapillary score. And they have publications now, stage 4 renal disease reversal, using that nutrient, which is a combination of seaweed, glycosamine,
because there's several seaweed products on the market already. We got arterial seal, and then we have the brown seaweed, and we have yeah,
exactly. So I think once again, it doesn't matter how much goji berry you take if your blood can't get the nutrient to your tissues. So I'm pretty excited about, always excited about that. Obviously, I still think people need to manage, there's basics, like people need to manage their stress. Now we could go into the senolytics, the recent Stanford study showing that people have 2 stages in life where they get accelerated aging. Like around the age of 42 to 44 and around the age of 60 to 64. And they have this accelerated, just kind of metabolomic uplift of aging. And we should be moving into those times of our life where we're protecting against that. So, the fisetin, dihydroquercetin, very interesting in terms of, helping with, senescence. But here's what people were doing. You got 24-year-old biohackers but they're like, oh, I'm going to take rapamycin. Why? You're not at that age. You don't need to take something like that, but which is of course a drug. But I think those areas are interesting. Delivery systems are interesting to me. For example, I've done a lot of research work with solid state liposomes. So in a tablet, solid form liposome that takes particles that are under 100 nanometers and is able to deliver them across the blood-brain barrier. That's interesting. I mean, I'm full disclosure. I mean, I did all the research on synapsin and RG3, the ginsenoside R3, which decreases, helps with microglial management. So you keep your microglia from getting too active. and I used liposome solid state technology to do it. And people chew it up and they go, hey, you know what? My brain's clear. I don't feel as
So
foggy
how
yet.
does liposome solid state technology, how does that say compare to like the liposomal products that Chris Shade has developed and designing the liposome, the liquid liposome, so it's the right size?
So there's a lot of liquid liposomes out, and I know Chris Shade, good guy. I inherently, and you can look this up, the FDA, their biggest issue with liquid liposomes is it's stable, and for how long is it stable? So in a liquid state, you get this. You know how liposomes work, right? You get this this electronic repulsion, but over time they start to get attracted again like a magnet, and then you go from a 100 nanometer molecule to a 3000 nanometer cluster, and now you can't absorb it. And so the interesting thing on solid state, and it was interesting, I ran into an old school pharmacist on this technology, and he had developed it for delivering oncology medications and pain medications because you could do a lot less drug, get it into the cell, and not create so much extra toxicity, right? So they've been able to show that, you keep the particle size under 100 nanometers for 2 years, it stays stable. And they do that through electron microscopy, where you can see, and fluoroscopy, where you can see the particles staying individuated instead of agglomerating. So nothing against any other liposome that's out there. I'm just working in the solid state side of it because I like the fact that it's stable. I like the fact that I can show the particle size. And so I've done a lot of work with that recently, and really have been enjoying the success, seeing people like taking 50 milligrams of curcumin, Sabinsa curcumin, and it getting the impact of even better impact in terms of inflammation than taking a 500 milligram curcumin. Right. So
well, we got the curcumin really wars out there.
curcumin, no doubt. Right.
Yeah.
And I'm not, once again, it's
so tell us about Synapsin and RG3. These are products that you developed, but they're available. They're only available through compounding pharmacy. Is that right? Or
Synapsin in a nasal spray is only available by prescription because you don't eat through your nose.
Okay.
Right? You can't eat through your nose. Everybody, anytime you do something intranasal, it can't be a dietary supplement because you don't eat through your nose.
Okay.
So we developed ginsenoside R3 through Metabolic Elite as a chewable tablet that is available because it's an extraction and fermentation from Myers Panax ginseng. And so that's available as a dietary supplement. And interestingly, we've got, I don't know if you've heard of the Arctic Challenge. The Arctic Challenge is a U.S. Special Forces guy, SEAL team member, Jimmy Graham, future NFL Hall of Famer, and 2 U.S. Olympic rowing team members that are rowing the Arctic Ocean. More people have been landed on the moon and walked on the moon than have rode the Arctic Ocean. And we're working with them to prepare them for it. So we've been giving them ginsenoside R3, this oxygen product, which that's soon to be released.
Okay.
And these are guys that are super fit, right? They're already super fit. And they're just saying, holy crap, I can't believe how well I'm doing. And the real reason RG3 is so interesting to me is that it just helps your brain to maintain its balance because you're keeping the microglial cells from getting overactive. And it helps with regeneration of neurons because of the upregulation of BDNF. And if you look at the chemistry side of it in published labs, it reduces calcium ion influx in the NMDA glutamate bridge from breaking, creating excitotoxin. If you've read Russell Blaylock's book, Excitotoxins, a phenomenal book from 20 years ago. He was a neurosurgeon. If you're that person that says, hey, I'm cognitively 2 o'clock, I don't like making decisions after 2 p.m. because my brain's foggy. I feel like I'm pushing the thought through Jello. You got to think about using ginsenoside R3 or now ginsenoside RB one in RG3 together, another ginsenoside that helps with just protection of that cognitive space and protecting the neurons and reducing oxidative stress. It was pretty amazing because we used that with Corvette Race Team. That was the first time we used in a sports way. Corvette Race Team, it came to Dr. Heyman, Andy Heyman, he was as my chief medical officer at Metabolic Code. And they're like, hey, our racers are crashing cars and we're not winning Le Mans. I'm like, my initial thought was, well, why don't you get different drivers? Maybe you need a different driver. And we cleaned them up. And what we did was we measured their core body temperature racing around the track. And it turns out their core body temperature was, as your body temperature goes up at core, your brain coherence goes down. So now your brain can't tell your reaction time what to do as well. We had them use synapsin, and what happened? Core body temperature went down, reaction time stayed good, and they won Le Mans. So wow. It's kind of cool. That was the first foray into the sports side, and then of course we were using it for people for cognitive function and executive function for a long time.
So synapsins, you got to get a prescription from your MD.
On the spray, on the tablet, you could just go to Metabolic Elite. Metabolicelite.co, and you can get synapsin tablets. And they work. You chew them up. They're in a liposomal base. Called a lipotab base. They work really well.
And the RG3, that's also available from that same company?
Yeah, that is actually what's in synapsin.
Oh, synapsin is RG3.
Is RG3.
I see. That's the oral form. I got it. Okay,
yeah.
Cool.
I love inventing and looking at compounds. I just can't help it.
Yeah, me too. I love it as well. So,
yeah,
cool. Okay,
all right.
Jim, I really appreciate it.
That was fun. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I did too. I'll send you links when we post it in about a month or so.
It's very good. Yeah, let's get after it. We'll do it. We'll post it up through all our little network too.
That'd be great. And I'll see you at the next big conference.
Yes. Okay. All right. See you soon.
Okay. Thanks, Jim.
All righty. Bye-bye.
Thank you for making it all the way through this episode of the Rational Wellness Podcast. For those of you who enjoy listening to the Rational Wellness Podcast, I would very much appreciate it if you could go to Apple Podcasts or Spotify and give us a 5-star ratings and review. As you may know, I continue to accept a limited number of new patients per month for functional medicine. If you would like help overcoming a gut or other chronic health condition and want to prevent chronic problems and want to promote longevity, please call my Santa Monica Weitz Sports Chiropractic and Nutrition office at 310-395-3111, and we can set you up for a consultation for functional medicine. And I will talk to everybody next week.